Yo friends, welcome to Next Level Consciousness with Linnea Stella. Today we will talk about the dismissive avoidant attachment style, and this is part 2 in the 3-part attachment style series. So the first part, if you watch this when it is launched, came out yesterday when we talked about the anxiously attached person. Tomorrow is the final part, which is the fearful avoidant, also known as the disorganized attachment style. But let's dive into the dismissive avoidant attachment style. So what is a dismissive avoidant attachment style? And let's just say dismissive avoidant for short, because I'm already getting tired of this long term. But you can see it as the polar opposite to the anxiously attached person. So the anxiously attached person, what characterizes them in terms of connection is that when they are triggered, that is when they are fearing to lose love, they are moving closer to their partner. The thing with attachment style is that all attachment styles are formed in childhood. In almost all of the cases, it is based on the relationship that we had with our parents or primary caregivers. So for the anxiously attached person, they had more positive association, and this is often subconscious, related to connection. And that is why when they are triggered, when they feel in an agitated state, they see connection because they see it as something positive. The opposite is true for the dismissive avoidant. So when they get triggered in a relationship, they move away. And this is called also that they deactivate. The anxious person activates, they seek connection when triggered. The dismissive avoidant deactivates. They run away from connection when they are triggered. And as you maybe can guess, this comes from the dismissive avoidant having more negative emotional associations around connection than positive. So basically, the dismissive avoidant, I'm not going to go into the origin of each attachment style because you can look that up if you want to. But basically, the relation they had with their caregivers or parents was that when I seek connection, it is not reciprocated. So why try? Why waste my time and energy to try to seek this closeness if I am just rejected? It doesn't go anywhere. So they learn very early on to self-soothe and to take care of their own needs. And I should also say that I am talking now about integrated attachment theory, because integrated attachment theory, it is founded by Thais Gibson from the Personal Development School, and she took classic attachment theory and elaborated it so that there is a solution for each attachment style on how they can become securely attached, like the steps that they need to take, the potential pitfalls, the core wounds that they have, the needs that they often feel are unmet, and so on. And we're going to cover all that now for the dismissive avoidant. But I really like this approach because it's not just telling you this is the problem, but it also tells you here is the solution. Because the good thing with attachment style is that everyone can become securely attached if you put in the time and effort. Because as everything with personal development, we don't just snap our fingers and then it's done, but you really need to be willing to work on it. Okay, but if you're here watching this video, I believe in you. I know that this is possible. So we'll start today by looking at some characteristics of the dismissive avoidant. Then we will look at their emotional patterns, some common needs, coping mechanisms or behaviors, core wounds, expectations, and their relationship to boundaries. So that will give you a very in-depth view of the dismissive avoidant. Whether you think that you are a dismissive avoidant or you are maybe dating or in a relationship with a dismissive avoidant or have someone close to you and you just want to understand them better. Because that is the beautiful thing with attachment styles, that it helps us to have more compassion to ourselves and to others and see that, okay, it's actually not my fault, it is nothing wrong with me, but it is always your responsibility to overcome whatever challenges you have in life and to heal. And this is such a beautiful recipe for doing it. And I also always say that while it can help you to understand your partner better or the person that you are seeing, it is never your responsibility to heal someone else, because that is, in essence, impossible. But it can just help you to guide that person, it can help you to understand them more. But of course, if you are in a relationship where you feel like, despite multiple efforts, like nothing is changing, you are the only one who is putting in effort, you might want to reconsider the relationship. So let's look at some common characteristics of the dismissive avoidant. And usually when I think of dismissive avoidance, I think of this traditional like computer geek who is just sitting in the basement with a hoodie, gaming all the time, they're never going out. Maybe they go to dubstep events in Paris. There are just a lot of interesting characters there. And I'm saying this with a huge amount of love because I'm not judging any attachment style. And I'm not saying that anyone is better or worse because that's of course not the case. But that's like the stereotype of the dismissive avoidant. I also have a feeling from what I've heard that the majority of dismissive avoidants are masculines, men. But that being said, like feminines, other genders can also be dismissive avoidants. So the way that you can spot a dismissive avoidant is that they are very logical, rational, in their head. They are grounded, distant, have a very practical rather than emotional approach to life. They are also very slow to warm up in relationships and especially in romantic relationships. And one huge characteristic is that they are disconnected from their emotions. And they often repress their emotions. So with that being said, none of us are robots or aliens. The aliens are just on my t-shirt. So dismissive avoidants still feel things. And the number one emotion that they experience on a regular basis is shame. Shame is a very big deal for people with a dismissive avoidant attachment style. And often this stems from when they try to see connection in childhood. And they felt like they didn't get the connection that they wanted. And they felt like, okay, there must be something wrong with me because instinctually, I am looking for love and comfort and connection and I don't get it from my parents or caregivers for one reason or another. And this is not always intentional from the parent or caregiver because usually what happens when we have an insecure attachment style is that our parents or caregivers, they really did their best, but they had their own portion of unresolved trauma and problems in life, and they weren't really available to the extent that would have created a secure attachment style. But that feeling, that programming that the dismissive avoidant received in childhood, that, oh, I try to connect but it doesn't work, leads them to believe that there is something wrong with me, and they feel shame. They can also have a constant low-level anxiety because they are very disconnected from other people, since other people are not considered safe to be around and they feel like they can't trust other people. And at the end of the day, we are all social beings and we all depend on at least some level of social interaction to feel safe. So if you are isolated, you walk around and constantly feel like there is no one there to have my back, and that leads to this low-level anxiety. Even if probably the dismissive avoidant would say, no, I'm fine, because they are so shut off from their emotions. Other common emotions are irritation, frustration, annoyance, and impatience. They also easily feel drained and overwhelmed. So let's look at some common needs for the dismissive avoidant. And when we talk about the anxious attachment style, it's just interesting to contrast with that because their needs revolve a lot around social life and love, connection, interactions with other people. And as you may have guessed already, the opposite is true for the dismissive avoidant. So their biggest need is to have their independence, their autonomy, freedom, but also to feel appreciated and acknowledged. And as the partner to the dismissive avoidant, it can be very challenging to know the right balance for them. Okay, they want to have this appreciation and acknowledgement because remember, they have this deep feeling that there is something wrong with me and this shame. So it helps a lot for them to be reassured from the outside that, yeah, you're doing really good and you're very respected and appreciated. But still, it can't be too much because then they feel suffocated. So that can be very challenging, of course, for the partner, especially since communication is not the strong suit of the dismissive avoidant. But they really want this understanding, acceptance and support. They also want to feel harmony, peace of mind. They want their own time to decompress. And also a sense of certainty, stability and safety. So all in all, it can be very tricky if you are dating or in a relationship with a dismissive avoidant to know, okay, but how can I find this balance? Because oftentimes the insecure attachment styles, they don't really know themselves what they need. So over to the coping mechanisms. And coping mechanisms are the behaviors that we turn to when we feel triggered. So I already leaked a little about this in the beginning of the video because then I said that when an anxiously attached person gets triggered, they activate, they seek closeness. They run after the person and try to get the reassurance and validation that that this person is not gonna leave them. For the dismissive avoidant, one of the main coping mechanisms is to be dismissive, to stonewall, to give silent treatment, to run away. They can turn to passive aggression because they are not really big on emotional displays, as the other insecure attachment styles can be. So often, if they are annoyed and they are upset and frustrated, they won't show it in a big way and display it with grand gestures, but it is more so something that you can read between the lines, like, oh, there is something that is off about my dismissive avoidant. And another very common coping mechanisms that is characteristic of the dismissive avoidant is what's known as creature comforts. So creature comforts are basically things that you do to replace emotional connection. You have the need for emotional connection somewhere, but since it doesn't feel safe for you to connect emotionally, you meet that need in a more material way as the dismissive avoidant. So that can be through binge eating, emotional eating, binge watching Netflix, or sitting up and gaming the whole night, maybe going to a dubstep event in Paris. That's kind of social though, semi-social, but you get my point. It can be to turn to electronics or food, also substances or alcohol. And that leads us to the core wounds of the dismissive avoidance. And this is a very interesting part, because the way that you can start to become securely attached and heal your dismissive avoidant attachment style is through reprogramming your core wounds. That is often the best starting point. So each of the attachment styles, according to integrated attachment theory, has 3 main core wounds, which are the most prominent often. And then they have a set of other core wounds too. But for the dismissive avoidant, the main core wounds are, I am defective, meaning that there is something wrong with me. And this is closely linked to this feeling of shame, and comes from how the dismissive avoidant experienced connection in childhood, as mentioned earlier. Then it is I am unsafe, which is true for all the insecure attachment styles, and I will be trapped, or I am trapped. And that means that they subconsciously or consciously associate connection with losing their freedom. Other core wounds can be I am weak, I am not good enough, I am helpless, and I am powerless. So if you resonate with being a dismissive avoidant, maybe just sit and feel like, okay, what felt the most true for me? And if it is hard for you to connect to your emotions and to know yourself, just set the intention that you will get the answer in the coming days. So you can also think like, okay, do I often feel like I'm not good enough? Do I often avoid to take action, even though I deep down want to do something? Because I have this feeling like, oh, but people will laugh at me, or they will make fun of me, I'm not smart enough, I'm not good enough. Or maybe you often feel ashamed. If you feel ashamed, you have the I am defective, or there is something wrong with me core wound. And maybe you often feel like you have this low level anxiety. That means probably that you have the core wound of I am unsafe. So that is a good starting point. And I also want to mention that if you resonate with, oh, but I have this feeling of I need a lot of independence and freedom, and I have this fear of being trapped in relationships, and I often feel powerless and helpless, like there's nothing I can do. That kind of feelings. But you also feel like you're very hot and cold, and you can sometimes be without boundaries and open up very quickly and have this emotional depth with someone. You may be a fearful avoidant. So I am getting a little ahead of myself, because we're going to talk about the fearful avoidant or disorganized attachment style tomorrow. But just know that if you resonate with that distant part, but not with the emotionally disconnected part, you may be a fearful avoidant. So how about the dismissive avoidant and boundaries? As opposed to the anxiously attached person and also the fearful avoidant, the dismissive avoidant actually has firm boundaries. Because remember, they have this feeling that connection is something negative. So it's better to just place boundaries, to just stay in my own bubble, and everything is just calm and good. So they have strong boundaries more often than not, but they often communicate them through actions rather than words. So instead of communicating like, hey, I need a little space, I need to be on my own now, which is a very healthy way of expressing boundaries, because of course we all need alone time every now and then. Instead, they often just give silent treatment. They stop replying to messages. They go missing in action. And this can be because they fear the potential conflict that can arise if they bring up the boundaries, like, oh, it's just going to be trouble and drama, so I better just disappear, and they will understand and they will give me space. but that often doesn't work with a partner. But that is the logic that goes on in the mind of the dismissive avoidant. And they can often, for this very reason, that they are very afraid of conflict. They can sometimes have a hard time to set many small boundaries in their everyday life. So they think, okay, it's better to just like run away and go to the jungle. I'm in the jungle right now. I'm not dismissive avoidant though. But just escape, be on their own, go no contact with no explanation, because they feel like, oh, but that's so much better. It's going to be so much easier than to be around someone and maybe get to know someone when they are dating someone or getting into a relationship, because then there are so many small situations where maybe they need to communicate a boundary and there is the potential for conflict. So it's better to set one big boundary instead of being present with the other person and constantly needing to communicate smaller boundaries. So sometimes if they are in that situation, the dismissive avoidant, that they are around someone that they are getting to know, they can feel very frustrated and stressed out because it's so hard for them and it's so draining. It takes so much energy to constantly need to communicate their boundaries, especially if their partner is not on the same page, but maybe their partner is a little more anxiously attached, which is often the case because it is very common that anxiously attached people are attracted to avoidants. It is this kind of trauma bonding because the avoidant person expresses and lives out things that the anxious person has repressed in themselves and vice versa. So this leads to an unhealthy trauma bonding, but that's a topic for another video. Let me know in the comments if you want to know more about this. So yeah, it is hard for the dismissive avoidant to consistently express small boundaries, and they can also feel very trapped and stressed out if they find their boundaries violated. So some common expectations that a dismissive avoidant has in relationships is that my partner should always be understanding when I need space. And I shouldn't need to explain to them. I can just come and go as I please. And yeah, that's not the recipe for a healthy relationship, as you can imagine, because all healthy relationships require communication. Also, as I hinted about earlier, they don't like conflict. So they expect that conflict shouldn't occur. If we ever disagree about something or we have a conflict, that's a sign that we are incompatible and we should just break up on the spot. They also don't want to make compromises. So an expectation is that I shouldn't need to make compromises. And each person in the relationship, both partners, should tend to their own emotional needs. And then they should just get together and everything should be lighthearted and easy and fun. And we should never need to, be vulnerable or go deep and express like, hey, that thing that you said, it actually hurt me. That shouldn't be a thing because that's just emotions and emotions are uncomfortable. So the dismissive avoidant expect that, okay, I take care of my needs, you take care of your needs, we get together, everything is just light and fun. And I shouldn't need to make any changes in my life whatsoever or my lifestyle because of the relationship. And of course, it's not healthy to completely give up all your interests, your hobbies. That's not what I'm meaning, because that's often what the anxiously attached person tends to do. They just forget about themselves and abandon themselves in relationships. That's not healthy. But on the other hand, being like this dismissive avoidant and expecting like, oh, but I should never meet the other person's need. I should never make any effort for them. I should just, reach out when I feel like, when I have time, when I have space, when I just feel 100% good about it. And they should never need to rely on me. That's not healthy either. So we need to find a level of healthy compromise in a relationship, but not sacrifice. So that is a difference there. Another interesting thing is that the dismissive avoidant tends to do what's called flaw finding. So they expect their partner to be perfect. And if you find like the slightest sign that they may not be a match, because remember they have this fear of conflict, they have very little tolerance for that and they are out. So that was all for the dismissive avoidant. So let me know if something resonated from this, either in yourself or in someone that you are or have been dating or been in a relationship with. And hit the like button if you got any value from this video. Subscribe for more videos on next level consciousness, and I'll see you in the next one.